Welcome to the Australian Property Investment Podcast with your host, Aaron Christie David. Each episode, we ask an expert to share their key insights for aspiring investors to make confident property choices.
G'day everyone, my name is Aaron Christie David and I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, and I am really proud to run a podcast called the Australian Property Investment Podcast, where every episode we bring what I call a best-in-breed subject matter expert. So someone who knows their trade, someone who's dealt with customers for a very, very long time and knows exactly what they're talking about. And today's guest is absolutely no exception to the rule. In fact, it says here you got 30 years experience. What did you do? Walk out of school and go straight into conveyancing? Did you, Jennifer?
Pretty much. I walked out of school and went straight into law.
So today in the studio, I'm joined by Jennifer Barnes, who's a conveyancer over at CVC Law, a local friend of our business at Atelier Wealth, and a local to Thirroul. So welcome, Jennifer.
Good morning and thank you,
I should say
Andy.
babyface Jennifer as a conveyancer. So Jennifer, just before we kick off, it's what I call the 3 Ps. So a bit about yourself personally, a bit about yourself professionally, a bit about yourself on a property front. So anybody happy to share and divulge, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Well, I'm very lucky to have made it into my 50s. Born locally, I was born in Bulli Hospital, grew up in Bulli and then moved to Thirroul. So been very, very lucky. Yes, I pretty much went straight into law, working for lawyers. Found myself in conveyancing accidentally and never left the area. Yeah. So, yes, between having a little bit of time off to have 4 children, that's been my job for the last 30 years.
Which job's harder, do you reckon, conveyancing or being a mum?
Oh, definitely being a mum.
Rewarding though.
Yes, very.
Lovely. And your journey with CVC, how's that going for you?
Oh, wonderful. I've been with CVC now for 8 years.
Lovely.
As I said, I've always been in legal firms.
Yeah.
I was actually my current boss's first conveyancing coach. So he was a law clerk when I first met him.
Yeah.
And it was my job to coach him in conveyancing. That was 28 years ago.
Unreal.
And he's began CVC conveyancing 18 years ago.
Yeah.
CVC conveyancing is now 10 years old.
Yeah.
He was a partner in a local law firm for a period of time and then decided to go out on his own and create his company, whereby there's 2 divisions. So we have our law division and our conveyancing division.
Excellent.
But that enables us conveyancers to concentrate totally on conveyancing and provide a better and more tailored service to our clients, only where we're not distracted by other areas of law.
So when you say distracted by other areas, I mean, this is a big distinction that a lot of people have with, do I go with the solicitor or do I go with the conveyancer? Naturally, you might be a little bit biased to say, well, go with the conveyancer, but I mean, a conveyancer is purely focused on the property.
Yes, and I think a lot of consumers are more comfortable going with a conveyancer rather than a lawyer. Having both within our company gives us both options.
Yeah, great.
And the added benefit of having lawyers is, and particularly when you're buying property, it's important to protect your asset, and we have availability for advice and services for wills, powers of attorney, estate planning that go with, owning property, that you're protecting that investment in the future.
Beautiful. I mean, you mentioned the word advice there. So before we do kick off our chat, I just want to mention that everything we discuss is general in nature and not intended to give advice.
Yes.
And if you do want advice, I would speak to a professional in the area that you're looking to seek assistance with as well. So Jennifer, one of the we were literally just having a chat before we jumped into the studio about timings, and this is probably very much the part that you and I play when someone's looking to buy a property. It always comes down to timing. Yeah. So when they see a property, their eyes light up, for example, and now it's like, now what? Whether they're pre-approved or not pre-approved, whether they've engaged a conveyancer or not. So I want to break that down and let's go step by step. So for people that are listening, it's going, okay, what needs to happen when and who is doing what at each stage? So if we go to the very start, what happens is someone goes, look, I'm having a chat, say, with a mortgage broker, I want to know how much I can borrow. Ultimately, it leads to a conversation around getting a pre-approval organised to then actively start property buying, yeah? At that stage, when should they be engaging a conveyancer, in your opinion?
We are happy for them to contact us at that stage that they're ascertaining the serviceability of their loan, so we can explain the process to them.
Beautiful. So what you're saying there is it's not too early to start. Don't look for a property and get a contract. Start super early.
Yeah, to know the process, particularly if you're a first home buyer, or if you are selling and purchasing another property, as in knowing how you can simultaneously exchange those properties when you're needing the money from your sale for your purchase, or whether you're substituting your security when you're just moving house to a upgrade or a larger property to support your family.
Excellent.
But yes, timing is important, and probably going to you first to know their borrowing capacity is very, very important.
Perfect. So this gets exciting, and this is that stage where someone's found the dream property and it's going to auction, say, in a week or so, and then they're on the phone pretty much going, what do I do? So if you're having that conversation, let us into your world and go, what's your advice at that stage? Go, here's what you need to do to get ready. Let's go play an auction scenario, come up in, say, a week or two. What should they be doing? Essentially,
there's 3 stages to a conveyance. So your pre-purchase or your pre-exchange stage, your exchange stage, and your settlement.
Yeah.
And as you know, in this market, there are a lot of auctions.
Yeah.
So in the normal circumstance, you will put an offer on a property, and an offer may be done verbally or in writing. I always suggest you do it in writing. An email to an agent is all you need to do, but it eliminates any confusion as to what the offer is or any conditions that are made with your offer.
Yeah. So when you talk about any conditions made with your offer, are we talking, say, negotiated 10% to a 5% deposit, for example? Yeah, that's fine.
Deposits, a lot of people don't have a 10% deposit.
Correct.
And 5% deposits are generally accepted.
Yeah. What about a deposit bond as well?
Deposit bonds, yes. But again, it's confirming that the vendor will accept a 5% deposit or a deposit bond.
Yeah.
Other things will be your pest and building report, and other quality reports depending on the property might be a strata inspection report.
Yeah, okay.
That gives us information about the property that's really important. And a pest and building report may unveil defects in the property that you can't see on your visual inspection.
Yeah.
So whether there may be leaks with the bathroom or issues with the roof or particularly structural issues.
Yeah.
And it enables you to renegotiate your price or your terms of the contract. And the terms of the contract can be amended. However, auction contracts.
Yeah.
An auction is binding when you bid at an auction. And these days, most auction properties have quality reports available for you to inspect before you attend the auction.
Yeah.
And it is important to speak to us before an auction because we can request amendments or special conditions to the contract. And some of those things may be, if there is a defect to the property, whether we want the vendor, whether the vendor is willing to have that rectified prior to completion of the property. Sometimes it's like an amazing big giant pot plant that the purchaser, it's a chattel more than a fixture.
Yeah.
But you may ask whether that will be included.
Nice.
Or a water feature or something that is part of the appeal to the property.
Great. And then also as part of that, are we talking settlement terms as well? So are we saying, look, instead of a standard, say, 6-week settlement for New South Wales, can we make that maybe a 4-week or even push that out? We're doing quite longer settlements at the moment.
Yeah, the settlement term is negotiable, and yes, we are doing longer settlements because, well, as you're aware, there's hoops to jump through with banks.
Yep.
And our current climate with the property market and how businesses and, banks have been affected with staff with COVID. Negotiating a longer settlement term is often very beneficial.
It's highly advised at the moment, isn't it?
Very much advised.
How quickly 6 weeks could go.
Well, a standard contract completion period is 6 weeks. So jumping back a little bit, your first stage is exchange.
Yeah.
Exchange contracts binds you to the contract. You can't get out of the contract.
Yeah.
There's consequences if, and possibly losing your deposit if you can't complete your contract. The period between exchange and our next period of settlement is generally that 6 week or 42-day period. And we are suggesting it be extended to take the pressure off and enable mortgage documents to be signed and get them back on time for settlement. Because if you are late to settle, pretty much all contracts have penalties. Yeah,
great. And we'll definitely come to that in a second. So, and sometimes we'll get a solicitor or a conveyancer kind of push back to a client, and this is where maybe gets lost in translation, going, well, we need formal approval before we can exchange, but in order to exchange, we need the signed contracts of sale, right? So it's a chicken and the egg scenario, because the bank is saying, well, we need the your signed copy of the contract of sale to then do a valuation, to then get to formal approval. But sometimes they're being advised by their solicitor or their conveyancer going, don't sign the contract until we get formal approval. So can you just kind of take us through that and go, what's the source of truth on this?
That is an issue because some banks are requiring contracts to be signed. And just
to give you an idea, contracts to be signed by the purchaser, because then that validates the exact purchase price, so the bank can order a valuation on that. Yeah.
A signed contract is not an exchanged contract necessarily. Yes. There are two contracts. One is signed by the purchaser and one is signed by the vendor.
Yeah.
And when your deposit is paid and you commit to that contract, the purchaser passes their contract to the vendor's conveyancer or lawyer, and they are dated and they become binding if there is no cooling off period. If your bank is asking for a purchaser signed contract, it's quite safe to sign your contract with that price on and pass it to your bank. And I believe the reason for that is when you prepare a contract for a real estate agent, it does not have a purchaser's name on it or a price, and there's a lot of bidding and offers on properties, and there's a little bit of gazumping going on, and that is the reason why we are often suggesting people enter into a contract with a cooling off period because it takes the property not off the market. It may be marketed, it may have further inspections. Yeah. But it does not allow the vendor to accept another offer, even if higher than your own. So signing a contract and putting a price on it and handing it to your broker or your banker it's just a document. It's a standard document that the bank needs to see in order to begin your process for your finance application.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And then we've got to the exciting part. So formal approvals come through with signed loan documents, and now probably about a week or two before settlement. And quite often people don't realise this, maybe if it's their first purchase or they haven't done it for a while, about the pre-settlement inspection as well. So take us through that component just before settlement. What should someone be looking for in that pre-settlement inspection?
In your pre-settlement inspection, the property should be in the same or similar condition as it was when you made your offer to purchase it. There's a lot of grey areas in pre-settlement inspections, as in even the lawn's not being done, there being rubbish, there being paint tins, there being debris or things left on the property. Yeah. It's a very difficult thing because we can't force vendors to do that. Yeah. A lot of the time we just rely on goodwill that it will be done.
And I think a lot of people go into that pre-settlement going, I'm here to find fault with the property, and it's like, that's actually too late. You're not here to nitpick, you're here to double check that everything was included, like dishwasher or the chandelier, what you mentioned, the water feature or that beautiful pot plant. everything you agreed to in the inclusions is there, as opposed to now it's my chance to go and nitpick and say that tap's leaky or that wall's messy, for example. And
no, that has to be done at the point before you enter into the contract. Any conversations you've had about a dent in the wall being rectified, if there's rubbish, building materials or any debris on the property, we really need to put a special condition in a contract that the vendor will remove those, otherwise you cannot enforce that.
Yeah, right.
And a conversation with the real estate agent regarding these things, obviously is helpful, but you also need to report that to your conveyancer so that we can put it in your contract and enforce those agreements.
Beautiful. Thanks very much. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and here's something that we're doing a lot more of, and I'll tell you why. So currently in Australia, the fifth biggest banks, we've got 4 big banks, the fifth biggest bank is the bank of mum and dad, believe it or not. What that means is parents are looking at the market going, we want our kids to get into the market. It's super, super competitive. Parents, their house value's gone up. They maybe sit on more cash and they want to help their kids get into the market. So guarantor loans is one option to do that. Now, there's 2 ways that, especially from a finance perspective, that I see parents try to help their children. One is, here's a cash gift I'm going to give to my child or children to help them get into the market. The other alternative is a guarantor loan. So we're going to make a clear distinction between the 2. And I want to be very, very clear with you when we're having a chat. I know that we've crossed this bridge plenty of times. What are the pros and cons for parents or children when we're entering into a support type arrangement? And let's go down the path first of a cash gift. So let's say, for example, parents want to give their children some cash to get into the market. I know from a loan perspective, banks, there's 2 ways. Banks either want to see that money into their bank account, and it kind of hits as a large lump sum. We can tell the bank that there's a large lump sum that's come in, and some banks are very, very okay with that. For example, other banks want to know where that large sum of money came from, and some may then say if it's cash from mum and dad, there's a stat dec that needs to get signed to say that is a cash gift and not a loan. So again, there's kind of the question behind the question, is it a gift or is it a loan? So there's a lot to kind of digest there for you, but from your experience and your perspective, break that down for us a bit as well.
There's probably actually 3.
Yeah, okay. 3
different scenarios with the bank of mum and dad. So yes, the first one, your gift. A gift is a gift. And the stat dec that's required is required by the bank to say that it is a gift.
Yeah.
And that mum and dad don't want that money back.
Yeah. Okay.
Guarantor loans.
Yeah.
An example would be Jack wants to buy a property. It's $800,000. He needs a 10% deposit.
Yeah.
He's got a great job. His ability to service a loan is fabulous.
Yep.
He does not have that 10% deposit. And that's really common when you're trying to pay rent
Definitely.
and live. To save the deposit is the hard part for young people. So mum and dad, if they don't have a mortgage on their property, can be guarantors on Jack's loan. So basically they are guaranteeing the loan. They're not required to make any payments on the loan, but the equity that they have in their house guarantees the shortfall that Jack has in getting his full deposit together. Yeah. It's important as a guarantor to realise, and guarantors are given legal advice.
Yes.
Because if Jack, for instance, defaulted, lost his job, whatever, can't pay his loan, then mum and dad will have a registered mortgage over their property with the same bank, and they're guaranteeing the loan. So it does fall back on them to
effectively come up with the contribution.
Yes, towards the loan. Now it's
a very small. I mean, I've done the numbers when we talk about guarantor loans and the issues that do come up, and banks will offer an olive branch to families or to Jack that are experiencing financial hardship, for example, and try and defer repayments or make it interest only. The reason why Jack probably can't make the loan is either he's lost his job or he's suffering from ill health.
Yeah.
So ill health probably means you needed income protection or some type of personal insurance. Get a job means, when we tell our clients this, if anything happens to you, one, you need to get financial planning advice. If you're doing a guarantor loan, that should be a mandate. And the next one is get a job. Like, do anything you can to then pay those bills, drive Uber, stack shelves, nothing against that. It's just saying do whatever you need to if you're out of work to make those repayments. And if you can't, speak to the bank earlier. But going back to your point, the parents, and rightly so, have a bit of a fear going, we're offering our house. Is our house in jeopardy? And the bank will say, well, actually, we're going to sell Jack's house before we go after mum and dad's house. And then if there's a balance, then potentially
they will always sell Jack's house before mum and dad's house. Issues are rare, but important to note that they can be there, and that is why that does sometimes
that conversation will rear its head. Yeah.
The other thing is if mum and dad are in a house and planning to downsize, Jack can refinance his loan in a couple of years and possibly borrow the extra money to discharge mum and dad's
that portion of the guarantor.
Portion that the guarantor is covering. They can refinance or substitute their security property also. The other avenue that a lot of people take with the bank of mum and dad is that personal loan agreement.
Great.
So mum and dad may not be able to gift the money.
Yep.
They may not be in a position to give the money. There's likely to be other siblings that mum and dad want to assist also. So sometimes personal loan agreements do come into effect.
Yeah. So take us through that. What's involved in a personal loan agreement?
A personal loan agreement is essentially a private mortgage.
Yeah, okay.
And the terms of the agreement, whether there's repayments or it's payable in full by a certain date, or there is interest or there's no interest, or however you choose to work that out, it's normally something that's done with your family, your parents or siblings, or a very close friend or relative. You can work out what your agreement is.
Yeah.
It is drawn up in a deed, which is a legally binding document, and often a unregistered mortgage can go with it, and a caveat can be lodged on a property. And the caveats can be lodged quite easily.
Yeah, great.
And when you have a loan agreement to support it, and it doesn't, it's not notified to the bank that there's a caveat.
Correct.
Unless it's done before somebody goes for a mortgage.
This is and this is a common one that comes up because people hear about a private loan agreement and they think the bank needs to then take that private loan into serviceability, therefore their loan doesn't service anymore, and therefore they go down the path of the stat deck, which then has its own complications, right? So what we're saying, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be one but done very well to protect the parents and the child's interests as well, right?
Yeah, it can be tailored.
Yeah.
It can be tailored to suit the parties, and obviously that's something that we're happy in CVC to provide an initial free advice on if that helps people get into the market, because that is what is holding people back a lot.
Yeah, okay. It's there for a reason. If it's done very well, it's family and money, so we don't want to make it any more complicated than what it needs to be or what it should be. But if parents are willing and able, and children then understand what the risks and what the rewards are, then if it's done very well, then realistically we should be able to release a guarantor, pay back mum and dad within a couple of years, especially in such a rising market where property values have gone up and loan balances can come down as well.
That's probably the best scenario.
Yeah.
Is mum and dad being guarantors for a certain period of time, and they don't want to mortgage over their property for an extensive period of time, because they are going to make changes in their life, and there may be other children in the family they want to assist. And you can't be a guarantor on multiple mortgages for different people. So it is a great way to do it as a short term to help a child into the market, because, like I said, most of them can service their loan. They can't.
Serviceability isn't the issue, it's the deposit.
The deposit is the issue, and as you're well aware, it's all those LVRs and
not paying mortgage insurance.
Mortgage insurance. That's a really large chunk for when you're trying to save.
You got stamp duty, then you got mortgage insurance. They can just kind of sting you a couple of times when you go, well, look, if parents are willing and able and the opportunities there, it's just making sure that's done very, very well, documented very well, and making sure that all parents and children know their rights, responsibilities as well.
And yeah, like you can have those agreements where, I'm not guarantor on your 30-year loan.
Yeah.
I'm going to be guarantor for a certain period of time until you are in a position to refinance and remove us from title, and then the parents are free, but they've helped. They've got their child's foot in the door, and they are free from that, and they have the ability to help their other children as well. After it's not necessarily a long-term thing.
Spot on, lovely. And then the last question I've got for you, and this came up, I can speak from personal experience when we got you to give us advice on one property that we're looking at, is around deceased estates. So in a nutshell, what happens when a property, and generally these go to auction because maybe the children are then selling off a parent or parent's property, for example. What does someone need to be aware of when they're looking at buying a deceased estate? When
you're looking at buying a deceased estate, they are often marketed before they are in a ready position to settle.
Right.
So when somebody passes away, the property is in the deceased person's name.
Yeah.
There is a process called probate that needs to go through the Supreme Court, and when probate is issued, the property can be transferred into the executor's name.
Okay.
A deceased person cannot sell a property.
Yeah.
So it has to be transferred into that executor's name to be able to sign the relevant documents to transfer the property. Properties are often marketed, but they're not often 6-week settlements.
Yeah.
Those contracts often have a special clause in there that will tell you that completion or settlement will be 2 weeks or 3 weeks after you notified that the property has been transferred into the executor's name.
So it's almost like you get called upon for settlement. So, I mean, we've seen some where they may go for 6 months, right, in terms of going through it.
I don't like to recommend anyone go into one that is 6 months.
Yeah.
And if I have a deceased estate, I like to hold back now a little bit. I mean, the market is so hot anyway that there's no issue selling them.
Yeah.
But as you know, most mortgages these days are approved for 3 months. They used to be 6 months. So it is.
For those listeners that don't understand what we just mentioned there is, if you're buying a deceased estate and it can go past the 3-month mark, that means your approval now lapses. Your formal approval on the loan documents could lapse depending on the bank that you go to, which means you then need to reapply for the mortgage. And if your situation's changed, and we see it sometimes, situations change in a 3 or 4 month period and you need to reapply, you're already committed to a contract, and that can just add to your stress levels, right?
It can add to your stress levels, and it's probably a little bit like when you're purchasing off the plan.
Yeah, spot on.
When you're buying off the plan contract, its completion period could be 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. But then you're given a moment's notice and, hey, you've got to settle in 2 or 3 weeks, which means we then need to scramble around again.
Well, again, it's just, keeping up to date with the development and its expected registration period. And, yes, it's timing. And, agents, that's what we're there to do, is to help people with that timing. But going back to your finance application lapsing and you having to reapply, it's with off-the-plan contracts and with deceased estates, it's important to maintain your existing position that enabled you to get your finance approved or pre-approved in the first place. So not a good idea to change jobs.
Not to become suddenly self-employed once you've bought a property.
Yes, don't become self-employed. Put off having a family. It's if you've been pre-approved on 2 incomes and unfortunately pregnancy and things like that, changing jobs, life moments make a big. Banks are only interested in your being able to service the loan. I mean, when I say that, banks can be compassionate in a lot of areas.
Correct.
And like you said, I'll offer olive branches. But to take pressure off yourself and stress, it is best to maintain your current position as much as possible until you have your finance and your loan is settled.
Good question. So, in the example, go back to a deceased estate, and they say, look, we call settlement in 2 or 3 weeks. Can you change the contract to say, well, can you give us 4 weeks or 5 weeks notice? Is that possible, do you think?
All contracts are negotiable.
There we go.
Their terms, conditions, their completion period.
Beautiful.
It's all negotiable. You do request updates.
Yeah.
So when you know that the status of the probate application, it's been lodged with the court, you can check with the court. Nice. What is your current turnaround on probate? Mm. So you get an idea of what the processing time is going to be. Wonderful. And then, ask them as, if you receive a requisition and, we sort of know that it's being processed and it might be just a couple of weeks. So we can get information as we go.
Fantastic. We will keep chatting for quite some time. I know that we've not only had the pleasure of working together for quite a number of clients, you've helped us personally as well, Jennifer, so I can kind of hand on heart say thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, your insights and your wisdom with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Wonderful.
It was a pleasure.
Excellent. We'll include your details in the links below, Jennifer, if you want to reach out to Jen over at CBC Law. Hope you found that episode helpful. We get a lot of questions, particularly on the legal side, because I know the conveyancing side just seems to be a little bit mysterious. Everyone knows about the property and buying, but kind of the nuts and bolts that go into conveyancing and the contract to sale is what you've been great at sharing with us. So thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review or drop us a note, and you can reach out to us at hello@ateliawealth.com.au. That's another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.